turn your camera on, you're more than welcome to do so. If not,
and that's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't see the camera option. It's usually at the bottom saying turn your camera on.
Right. But that's okay. We're gonna move forward.
Amen.
And we're gonna have the conversation because it is so important and people are really excited, and so am I. So let me first start with welcome. My name is Tiffany Turner Allen. I'm the Executive Director of Nonprofit Prince George's County, and I am so excited to launch our Courageous Conversation series. And this is the first one in response to the racial injustice and unrest that is happening across the country. It is long overdue, but I'm just really excited that we're able to launch it and that we're able to start with Leslie Redmond. Before we jump into our conversation with Leslie, I wanted to just share a few quick housekeeping points.
A little bit about Minnesota. Let me just give you the lay of the land. Minnesota, it has some of the worst racial disparities in the nation. And why that is so alarming is because typically Minnesota ranks the best when it comes to healthcare, education, lakes. Minnesota has more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any other state. I like to call Minnesota the white Wakanda that has hidden in plain sight for too long and at the expense of Black bodies. So what
Leslie, we can't hear you.
Could you hear anything I said or no?
You said at the expense of Black bodies, and then you were muted again.
Okay, perfect. It said it came from y'all end, but I'm back now. So y'all did hear about the disparities in Minnesota, correct? Okay, perfect. So we have been warning the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota that you cannot keep murdering Black bodies and expect nothing to happen from it. We know we saw with Justine DeMond's case a couple years ago, it was a white Australian affluent woman who was killed by Muhammad Noor, who was a Black Somali Muslim man when she came out in a dark alley and he shot her. He has been convicted. He was the first in modern history to be convicted. And why that is so important, Tiffany, is because this has literally been a Wild Wild West, where police officers are allowed to murder Black bodies. And the only reason why we saw justice in that case was because it was a white woman and you were dealing with a Black man. Now, fast forward, here we are to current day George Floyd. And I want to definitely say there have been so many other murders. 5 years ago, I was at the 4th precinct. We occupied the 4th precinct for 18 days. The summer following that was Philando Castile's murder in St. Paul. Really, this is not the first time that the world has been paying attention to Minnesota. I just think that why it's so triggering right now is because we're witnessing it nationally, and it's all happening at the same time. And I think that actually God is using this, especially with us all being home with COVID-19, right? Like we're at one stage of emergency to the next stage of emergency to the next stage of emergency. And so when George Floyd was murdered, and this was actually documented, just like you all over the nation, the people in Minnesota was especially outraged with what was going on. And they have been uprising. Can you all still hear me? They have been uprising. So the national media a lot of the time has been calling it looting. I don't look at it as looting, Tiffany. I look at it as uprising. And honestly, we've saved the city from burning for a long time, and I'm not promoting it, but what I will say is I believe that when you put Black people in extreme states of poverty, and people, especially we've seen videos of undercover cops breaking windows of different businesses and basically opening the doors to the Black community, we're going to go in and take survival as a basic human instinct. And like I said, we have some of the worst racial disparities. Then you add on COVID-19, Black people have literally and figuratively been starved by the state of Minnesota. And so what you see is, yeah, they get the pictures of the Black people going and getting the material from the store, but there are no pictures to show Black people burning these stores, because I believe the mass majorities of these burnings are not the Black community. Tiffany, these burnings are very professionally done. I saw one building that had a perfectly cut triangle sawed out of the brick. I don't even know how they did it. I'm telling you, like, it's some very extreme stuff. And if you watch the burning buildings, why they're burning so long is because they burn from the inside in a very professional way. I think these are white arsonists. We know that there have been white supremacists who are in our community, burning down our community. That's why actually the NAACP, we started an initiative of patrolling and policing our own community and staying out all night to make sure that our churches and local businesses don't get burned. And so I say that to say, Black people in Minnesota were already in a state of emergency because of the vast disparities that we have. Then we were in a state of emergency ×2 with COVID-19 that disproportionately impacts Black people. Then we were at a state of emergency ×3 when we had to witness another Black man be murdered at the hands of Minneapolis police. And so now we're at an emergency ×4 because our communities are being burnt and then our kids are being blamed and then being called super predators. And so I don't know if any of you saw my interview on CNN, but I talked about that, of how I don't believe that our kids should be painted out to be the monsters, because they're not. And, you know, if no one else is going to stand up for them, I will. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to Tiffany to give whatever the next question is I always have to salute Chief Arredondo, who was the first African-American police chief in Minneapolis. He is phenomenal. He has done a great job. He fired these officers within 24 hours of the tapes being released. This is unprecedented. He deserves all the accolades in the world. Even us policing the community could not happen but for Chief Arredondo. He's actually come out here on several occasions to make sure that we're safe. His officers know to leave us alone because we are armed and we are here to protect our community. People like Representative Ilhan came out the other night. Our council members, Jeremiah Ellison's been out every single night patrolling with us. City Council member Philippe Cunningham has been out here, people from the mayor's office. And so people are very supportive of Black people protecting their community. And that's a narrative that maybe you won't get as much, but the Washington Post was just here last night. So y'all are kind of getting a little fresh preview, because I haven't talked about that publicly on a national platform yet.
Well, Leslie, I think that you have so much to say, and so I want you to be able to lead this conversation. You're answering a lot of the questions that I have and other people have already shared. One of the things I'd like for you to share your connection, even just to the area, because for a lot of people, they'll say, but why Leslie, right? Share, can you share? Hi, sis.
Hi, sister. I don't know what just happened. All of a sudden, it was like, voila.
It's okay.
I'm talking about DC. Maybe we'll take it as that. So for those of you who don't know, I'm born and raised in the inner city of Washington, D.C. I love D.C. like no other. I actually left to go to undergrad in Miami. I'm a first generation college graduate, and how I ended up in Minnesota was for law school. I recently received a JD MBA and passed my bar in Minnesota.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Tiff.
I have nothing but love for you. So share with me, I think there is this conversation a lot of people are having saying it's happening there. What about here? So how does it impact me here? So, we're the nonprofits of Prince George's County. And so we interact with everyone in the Washington, D.C. metro area, but we see that Minneapolis really kind of sparked. And, there was a spark, and then all of a sudden the uprising started to come up all over the country. Can you share with people about why it's important for us to, one, stay informed and how it's connected to our local communities?
That's a great question, Tiff. So one of the things I'll say is, until we are all free, none of us are free. And I think that's becoming more and more evident every day, where people are seeing that could be my son, right? That could be my husband. That could be me. As a Black woman, there's a lot of Black women who are murdered, and we don't get as much acknowledgement, and then we're brutalized by the police and we don't get as much acknowledgement. But I think that this is generational trauma that not only have we experienced in the past, but we experience in the present. And I believe that our community, again, is upset. And I remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, he once talked about how riots are the language of the unheard, right? And people, that Unheard is not exclusive to Minnesota, but it's all over. And I think, like Fannie Lou Hamer said, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Like, we're exhausted, we're fed up. I think COVID-19 gave a lot of people time to evaluate their life, right? The fact that, many of us were dying, and what is our life for, and how does it matter? And for me, COVID-19 made me lean more into faith and fear. And it's just continued to be that way all throughout, because I have felt in my spirit a sense of faithfulness and dedication and lack of fear that I've never felt before.
Okay. I know, sis, you haven't you, I want to make sure I have this correct. Aren't you the youngest NAACP chapter president?
Yeah, so I'm 28 right now. I became the president at the age of 25. At the time, I became the youngest president in the history of the Minneapolis branch and one of the youngest presidents in the nation. And I was a part of the Next Gen Leadership Program with the NAACP. And so many of you have seen my brother. He's not my real brother, but you know, Black people, we all siblings. My brother, James Woodall, who was really working in Georgia. He's the Georgia State Conference president. And so he's been out there fighting a good fight as well.
So what do you say? There's a lot of conversation when people have been silent for so long. They haven't said anything. They didn't say anything when the video of the murder of George Floyd came out. And now there are a lot of comments that people are making in terms of how to protest. What's the proper way to protest? What are your words and what do you have to share about what is considered proper and
so, Tiff, you know, I don't know if y'all can see my head, but I always say, don't complain, activate. I'm going to get you some merch, Tiff. Don't complain, activate. And the idea is that you don't have to be President Barack Obama or Beyonce Knowles Carter in order to activate your community. You could be a mom, dad, sister, brother, teacher, janitor. There are everyday men who came out and answered the calls to patrol North Minneapolis. That was a form of activation. I think instead of people looking and saying, because people tell me all the time, Leslie, I can't do what you can do. That's right, because God didn't create you to do what I can do, but he created you to do what you can do. And so figuring out who you are and how you best service, right? For our white allies, I think it's about listening to Black people. That's the first thing that you could do, right? Not thinking that you know more about our problem because you read it in the textbooks when we've experienced it in real life, right? It's compensating Black people for their work, for their time, for their education. I honestly am sick and tired of giving out free labor and emotional labor that we have to give to nonprofits and white people who are trying to learn. And don't get me wrong, you all should learn, but there also should be some compensation because my ancestors have done way too much free labor. And I'm all about activism. You know, I'm the president for the NAACP, and I don't get compensated for any of the work that I do unless it's outside of the NAACP work and people just want to be a blessing to my life. I don't have a salary. I don't get a stipend, none of that. The work that I do is because I believe in our community, and I don't believe that we have the luxury of being silent. And I think that other people are realizing that. Some people say, well, you know, are you frustrated that it's all these new people who are getting activated? And I say, no. Join a party, you know, whenever you do it. And one of the people that really inspired me with that was Michelle Alexander and how she talked about being a civil rights attorney and still not understanding the gratitude of what was actually going on in the community. And so if this could be a Black, educated civil rights lawyer who didn't understand, and if she could grow to then end up writing New Jim Crow, who do we know else that's going to be great and activating a major way? And you know, I don't live in a glass house, so I don't throw no stones at people. I feel like everybody should join a fight and just thinking about what that looks like and looking out for your fellow brother and sister.
And that's my question. I get people asking all the time, how do I participate? And like you said, I think you have to pick and choose, like, where are you going to best be served? So I want you kind of from the front lines to share all the different spaces that you know that exist where there can be some support and it needs some support. So what are some of the things people can do?
Yeah. So for instance, economics is huge, especially for people who are on the front line. People pour into individual activists. So people have like asked me for my Cash App, I'll give them that. NAACP, we have a PayPal, people will give to that. In addition to that, people provide us with resources. There have been a lot of donation for community members who need essential items like waters, diapers, toilet paper, X, Y, and Z. In addition to that, when we're patrolling, people have donated walkie-talkies and a whole bundle of different things. And so it's about figuring out where you can provide. Maybe you aren't in a position to provide economically, but maybe you're sharing a post on social media and leveraging your social capital, right? Maybe you're leveraging your voting currency and making sure that you're voting in alliance and saying, hey, and challenging people, say, hey, where did you stand on these issues? Did you stand up when George Floyd died? Where are you standing? And then talking to some of the people who are in the spaces to get a better understanding of that. In addition to that, providing emotional support and just being there and asking people, hey, are you okay? You want me to cook you dinner? You know what I mean? Like, how can I support you? And I would really encourage people to ask people how they can best be supported, because people like to give you what they want to give you. But a lot of times, why don't you just ask the people that's doing the work?
It's so much. It is so much. I mean, the fact that you are still sitting here and you are smiling, I'm telling you, you are just a blessing for me to see you in light of everything that you are that you're out there doing.
God is good. And, you know, unlike our brother, George Floyd, we still have breath in our body, Tiff. And so we have to keep a smile on our face. We have to keep fighting. And, you know, Harriet Tubman said she was entitled to two things, either freedom or death. And I think that's where we're at in life.
So do you believe that a person can remain neutral at this time? A lot of people are saying that they're neutral. They don't have anything to say. How do you feel about that? Where do you stand on that?
I think that, Tiff, if I stood by and watched somebody beat you or rape you in public and I was quiet about it, people would say they were outraged by my behavior, right? We think about what happened to our Jewish brothers and sisters, right? America jumped in, everyone jumped in, because when they saw, and that's why I think it's important for us to distinguish, this is not just a civil rights issue that we're talking about, Tiff. This is a human rights issue that we are talking about, and human beings are being violated. And even the founding of the NAACP was founded by a lot of white people. They realized that this was a human rights issue and that they were part of this fight and that we were all in this together. You cannot be quiet during this time. Honestly, even if you have an opinion that might not be as popular, you need to put it out there and don't be afraid to be challenged and push yourself to become the best version of yourself, because this is the moment, this is the season for activation. And so I just encourage you all to lean into that. I just put my Cash App. I'm going to put the NAACP PayPal as well, just because you were asking for different ways that people can support. And so I wanted to give that outlet. But I think it's important for you all to become educated at this point. I think that so many Americans have been miseducated about the Black Panther Party and why we needed to defend ourselves. And I think that's becoming more and more clear every day. People have been miseducated about the civil rights movement and the strategy that actually goes behind a lot of the organizing, and that this stuff is not just done at whim, but there's actually a strategy and tactics that are deployed and utilized very intentionally, realizing that the work that we do is not easy. You know, even the chief said to me the other day, he was like, President Redmond, you know, you have to rest because you haven't even had time to process George Floyd death. And that's so real. And I know that at some point I'm gonna crash. And it's about where are people during those times, you know, and saying, hey, how can I help you and be a support to you?
We had somebody that asked a question and they said, what if you don't know a person? What if you know nobody that's involved in the program?
You know me and you know Tiffany. So you all cannot say that you don't know a person. I recommend that you all follow me on social media. It's actually the same as my Cash App that I put below. Leslie E. Redmond, Leslie. The middle initial is E, and then the last name is Redmond, Redmond. So you cannot use that excuse at all anymore. You all know Tiffany. You can reach out to her. But again, I would encourage you all to go do some reading. So let me give you some readings, just in case you say you don't know anybody, you can't reach out to anybody. I recommend you read The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, read the autobiography of Assata Shakur, the autobiography of Malcolm X, New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Those would be my 4 starter kits.
And I will make sure I send that out. I love all of them. Okay, so a lot of people, we know it's racial unrest. We know that Black bodies have been lynched and murdered for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the outcry that we're seeing now, you know, we've had times in our history where this has happened. This is a 2-part question. The first part is, how do you explain to people that this isn't about race? Because even in this particular case with George Floyd, a lot of people were saying,
Wi-Fi isn't set up on your Echo Dot.
Sorry.
No problem. And in this particular case, people would say, well, you know what? All 4 officers, we want to have them charged. But what people did not expect is that all 4 of the officers were not white men. So what do you say to people about that when people talk about this is a race issue, one, and holding, and people are believing that we're only trying to hold white people accountable for behavior, for this type of behavior. And then secondly, is this just also about police brutality? What other levels of accountability in our systems do you see that need to be addressed? So it's a 2-part question.
Okay, Tiff, that's a great question. Let's dive into it because I think it's both and. First and foremost, for me, race is involved in almost any and everything that's dealing with anything in America, right? Like it is embedded in the soul, right? It is a part of the foundation. And what we have to be clear about is white supremacy can act through anyone, right? It's not based on the color of your skin. And that's why it's so systemic and it's such a culture and it's so institutionalized. And, you know, we say all your skin folk ain't your kinfolk. So just because you're a Black person doesn't mean that you really are conscious and you understand what's going on. You know, one thing I will say about the Black brother who was in the situation is that that was actually like his training officer. So like he was still in training. He was a new officer, right? And this is a culture. And a lot of the time there's a blue shield, right? That people don't speak out. And I really do hold all 4 of those officers accountable because had even just one of them stepped up and say, hey, this is enough. Let's put Mr. Floyd in the car. He's under arrest. He's in handcuffs. We don't need to stand here for 10 minutes, putting our knees on his back and our knees in his neck, right? And so had any one of them stood up, it could have been a totally different outcome. And so I definitely hold all of them accountable. Yes, race plays a significant factor. And again, history, they would understand that the history or the foundation of policing stems from slave catching, right? And so the fact that Black people were never identified as human beings in America at the beginning. The fact that police were put in place to protect white homeowners, specifically white male homeowners, and that's still who they are, specifically there to impact. And then, you know, it trickles down to everyone else. That is very relevant because that system and institution is very much so still operating in the way that it has in the past. And people at the bottom take orders, right? That's one thing that I definitely know is that everything stops from the top. And that's why I'm so thankful that we have Chief Arredondo and that it trickles down because what he's showing y'all is that he's not going to accept it. Now, had he created a culture where officers thought they could get away with it, it would continue to have been perpetuated. And I want to say this is not the first time that Chief has reprimanded somebody. We just had someone get demoted for her racist comments on Facebook, you know, and he did that. And he's done a number of things to really hold officers accountable. So I don't just stand with Chief because he's a Black man. I stand with Chief because he's a Black conscious man. And I don't just stand against that brother because he was Black, but I stand against him because he was not a Black conscious person that stood up. But I also recognize how hard that can be sometimes. And while I would have done it, I won't want to put that burden on other people. And I do have some compassion, not only for him, but I have compassion for all of them. And I pray for them. But I also think that they need to be held accountable for their options. Nothing can bring Mr. George Floyd's family back, but we do need to hold officers accountable. In the same way that if you or I went out here and killed somebody, we would be held accountable. The police should be held to an even higher expectation versus getting off easier.
Thank you for that. And then what about, how do you respond when we talk about, you know, people say it's about police. And I think that when we talk about systems, like there are a number of different places where this is impacted, from judges to lawyers, you know, prosecuting attorneys. What other people do you believe, what other spaces do you believe we need to be focused on outside of just law enforcement, if any?
Education system. So that's my really big one. I think that we talk about modern day slavery and prison industrial complex, and all of those things are very important. But one of the things we don't talk about is the first form of slavery and enslavement is through our education system. Once you can get someone's mind, and Carter G. Wisham talks about that in The Miseducation of the Negro. He said, once you can get someone's mind and control them and belittle them enough, you won't even have to ask them to walk to the back door. They'll go in it voluntarily. And if there is no back door, they will create one because you crushed and beat them down so much. So I think the first institution that actually is hurting us is the education system in America.
Okay. Okay. So we know that I think that this is a watershed moment in time, right? And we have to really build upon this momentum. And so there will come a time when the uprising no longer is showing up in the way that it currently is, but how can it continue, right? How do we continue to uprise outside of this space when people are no longer outside overnight? Because now you have some communities that have been decimated, you have people who are tired, you have people that, you know, need places to live. Like what happens next to maintain and build upon this momentum to build change? And we actually have people that are asking for some question came in asking if you have any specific ideas around recommendations about how to reform police forces. Like, is there any specific legislation that you may be pushing or policy that you may be suggesting? So I know it's a multi-part question.
Give me the first part again, too.
So about maintaining the momentum after.
Oh, yes, about the uprising. Yes. Okay. So one of President Johnson's favorite sayings is that, you know, voting is one of our greatest forms of currency. And so I definitely encourage people to not only vote, but run for office. I encourage people to make sure that they fill out and they make sure that they're counted when it comes to the census. This is a census year, and that will predict how much funding gets allocated in our communities, which is very important. Show up to your school board meetings, city council meetings, again, activating yourself in a major way. A lot of the time how we exist externally is only a reflection of what's going on internally. And so taking care of our inside, which I'm not doing a good job at. As we're on this call, I'm realizing how tired I am and how much sleep I really do need to get.
I know, and that was going to be a question I was going to ask you. How are you taking care of yourself, and what
Girl, I'm doing a horrible job, Tiff. I'm not even gonna lie to you. It is, and I need to do better at it, and I know I need to do better at it because I've been here before at the protests and fighting, but it's so hard. It's so hard to, you know, it's hard for some people to get on the front lines. It's hard for me to get off the front lines, you know. Yeah, I just feel a calling on my life of duty and obligation, but I do think I need to slow down a little bit and pace myself because, in the words of Nipsey Hussle, this is a marathon.
Okay. You know, I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to be texting you, okay? I just want you to know.
I know, Tiff is like in real big sister mode. I already see her over there breathing hard and like, oh, Lord, this poor baby.
So the second part of the question was someone posed a question and he said, well, what recommendations?
The recommendation about the police, I honestly would say those are not hard to find. I would just say you all have to just do a little research and a little digging as to policies and procedures that are being presented. I know one of the things is creating metrics to actually track and see what the demographics are that are being arrested, that are being brutalized, that are being killed by police. Because if you can track it and if you can calculate it, then you can address it and hopefully move forward with it. But a lot of the time we just don't even have that data. So data matters.
Okay. And, you know, and that's one of the things I will tell you, I've noticed is a challenge in many of our Black and Brown communities. Our data gets captured by other people. So other people that have the resources and they can designate the staff to come in and capture that data, and they utilize it in different ways that continues to benefit and fund their organizations more mainstream, and it doesn't really trickle down to the communities where the data is coming from. So where it's being captured. So how we can come in and kind of own that data and work with people to be able to own that. That's important. Okay, so there's been a lot of conversations. I've been seeing stuff going back and forth on social media about, you know, we talk about, yesterday was called Blackout Tuesday. So a lot of people are saying blackout, and I think that the message got crossed for a lot of people in terms of what the intent was. So the original intent was like to show solidarity to, you know, Black people in terms of, you know, understanding about the racial, I won't say understanding, but to stand in solidarity as we, you know, go through the pain that we're going through and try to process.
And people were supposed to be boycotting and not spending money yesterday, right?
Exactly. And so yesterday was also a voting primary day in several different places. And so with that being said, I've started to see a lot of information go back and forth, and people are putting out a list of corporations, companies, and they're saying, hey, you know what, don't spend here. Is there a process? Like, what are you all doing to look at how you move forward, and how do we support or hold, corporations accountable? Like, what's your thought process in that?
Well, I think that we've already started with building these authentic relationships and thinking about, again, what are some of the solutions? Because I believe the community already has the answers, right? A lot of times we just don't have the resources and the platforms to actually do it. But I believe that we can do it, and we will do it when we put our mind to it and create some type of plan and agenda. I think we have to, again, just pace ourselves to know that a change is going to come, but it's only going to come if we activate.
And so with that, I read not too long before we got on the call that they're expecting some sort of a statement later on about what's going on in the George Floyd case. I think it's from the Attorney General or the state's attorney there.
Probably,
so,
that makes sense.
What are you hoping for? What are you expecting, or what are you looking for that would be, I won't say it's a win, because this man lost his life, so there's no winner in that space, but what do you see as progress in the right direction?
So, I mean, there's so many layers and there's so much nuance to this. One, we want to see all 4 officers charged and arrested, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is Mike Freeman, the Hennepin County attorney, messed up the first charges so much. I know Keith Ellis and our attorney general is going to have a hard time kind of fixing that and figuring out that and putting different charges. And I don't think they have a hard time, but it's just something that needs to be done.
Okay. And are you working with, I know you say you have a great working relationship with the police chief, what, the mayors, your city council people, other community leaders, how
yes,
are,
exactly.
What'd you say?
Yep, I was just saying the mayor's office, really appreciate Mayor Fry for really standing up and stepping up and supporting Chief Arredondo, supporting us. And I remind people this is not a moment, but this is a movement. City Council member Jeremiah Ellis has been out here every night with us, patrolling the area. There's just a lot of people who have reached out or who have come out, and I really, really appreciate it. I believe that collaboration is key and critical.
Okay. So I had someone else, she asked the question, as a white woman, she feels paralyzed and she has emotions and feelings and she wants to say something, but because of criticism that she receives from, or, getting from the Black community, that kind of holds people back from sharing. What are your thoughts around that? I've heard that comment a few times.
I really, to our white brothers and sisters especially, this is your time for humility. I have a great deal of compassion for you all, but this moment is not about you. This is not a moment for us to come in and save you as we are trying to get ourselves out of a burning building, right? And it's not to say that you don't need to care for yourself, because you have to have compassion for yourself before you can have it for anyone else. And so you need to do that, and you need to do the work, and you probably need to compensate a Black person to work with you and to help you through it. But what cannot happen is to continue to put the burden on Black people, especially for free. It's just, to me, it's not fair, it's not realistic, and it's not sustainable. And for far too often, Black people, we are teachers, we are givers, but we always end up suffering, and the expense is always on us.
Thank you, sis. Thank you. So I have a few more questions here. So we talk about the education of white people and about being, humility at this moment. So when we go into the workspace, so there's an organization that said that it's basically white led, but then the majority of people that they are working with are Black and brown people, right? So they have a difficult time bringing in and identifying people, Black and brown folks, to come in and mentor these young people. So,
and they don't have a hard time. They don't want Black people to come in. And that's the thing. We have to start calling a spade and stop lying to them and stop, I just feel like in this time, we have to be very intentional. We don't have any time to play games. You know what I mean? Like, we have to be honest and call a spade a spade. Black people have different relationships with each other. We're able to impact each other in a different way. A lot of the time, businesses don't bring in people because we're too effective, and they actually don't want to solve the problem, else they would be out of a job. And I think We have to call that out. We have to talk about the fact that Black people are being silenced. People will bring Black people in institutions, ask them to do something, to micromanage and push them out the door, right? And many of these systems have built in like immune systems that push out anything that threaten them. And a lot of times strong Black people, especially strong Black women, threaten them. And Senator Elizabeth Warren just called me earlier today, right? And we had a conversation. And I told her it was crazy about like the parallel of the officer having his knee on George Floyd's neck, because America has figuratively and literally had their knee on our neck forever. And for our white sister allies, they've had their knee on the necks of Black women and men. And we see it with men a lot of the time, with crying out rape and crying out you're scared. And we see it in New York. A lot of the time with Black women, it doesn't even get called out at all, but it happens too often. And so for me, it's like, let's be honest, right? We could get Black bodies into these. We know that Black people could probably handle most of these problems in our sleep, but we don't want to do it. Right? Like, I believe that in America, most of the things that we want to solve, we solve them. Look, it was a COVID-19, we shut down the whole world. There was billion-dollar bailouts. Like, come on, right? Like, a lot of the things we do is not because we cannot do it, it's because we choose not to do it. And us playing around with it is not the solution. And again, I say this from a place of love and compassion, but at some point we have to start being honest.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And I've seen that too many times, and I'm not a stranger to seeing that. And even on the flip side, another question that someone posed was, how do you do this work as a Black person in a predominantly white institution? So whether it's a nonprofit,
it's hard.
Education, again, I've seen where once, people say, let's have a conversation, let's talk about it. And then once questions start coming, at that point, and even the way that we communicate can, people will say that it's threatening, right? So when you become, passionate about something, people will highlight that. So what do you suggest to people, Black people doing this work within white systems?
I just wanted to even add on to what you're saying. Will be deep and appropriate, right? So I even think about the way that Black people communicate with our kids. We are huggers, we are lovers, you know what I mean? And a lot of the time when we're in spaces, we're told that's a liability, that's a risk. If I did most of my work based on liability and risk, I try to limit them, but that can't be the focus, you know what I mean? Because this is really life or death. And our kids, we communicate different. We have a different culture. And instead of our culture being embraced and celebrated, we are forced into assimilation and taught to turn our back on our culture. And everything Black is deemed as inappropriate and everything white is deemed as white, and it's very, very problematic, And so for me, we have to shift the narrative and how we support and how we help. It has to look very different, and we have to start, what they say, to listen to Black women, listen and compensate Black women and pour into them and believe Black women. And I don't think we have to beg you all to do it. And I want to be clear, and I don't know if it's COVID, I don't know if it's because I'm tired, I don't know what, but I'm tired, Tiff. I am tired of playing Ring Runner Rosie. And, I believe, and I've said this numerous times, just because you challenge something doesn't mean that you hate it, right? Like, I think actually because you love something, you challenge it and you want it to be the best. I believe that we can be better, that we can do better, that we can be better, not only allies, but we can be better human beings to one another and friends to one another, but we have to get to know each other. One of my business professors once said, people like to do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. And a part of the problem is we don't even know each other. And so you all have got an opportunity to somewhat get to know me, and I hope that you will follow me on social media, because I post a lot of really good information. Again, it's Leslie E. Redmond. And I did post it in the chats, and we have a lot of great conversations and a lot of honest conversations, because we need to get out of our comfort zone. Sometimes we're looking for the Black person to just pat us on the head and say, oh, you're doing fine, even though you're being very oppressive and disrespectful towards Black people. And to me, that's not a friend. A friend would actually tell you, hey, I think you could have went about that different. Hey, maybe you should hire a Black person to do this instead of trying to tell a Black person's story. I think if you really love someone, you're honest with them.
Mm-hmm. And with that, to add on to that, I think I would be remiss not to also mention, when we talked about the system of white supremacy, how it permeates all people of all races. And so there are people who look like us that will do harm to us, and we need to be able to call them and pull them to the side, and people have to be receptive in that space. And so I think that it's not getting any Black person. It's really, I think you have to really engage the people within your organization and within the community, because they will let you know if somebody is authentic and sincere, or if you are just literally putting in a body just, as another, and sometimes it's done in the form of microaggressions. I'm going to put this physical body here, but they're going to be beholden to me and my white supremacy ideology in this organization or this structure or this community.
And Tiff, they want a Black face that is silent. That's why they get so upset when the athletes start speaking out and the entertainers start speaking out, because they're like, look, you have too much influence. We're not paying you to talk or think. We're paying you to perform and entertain us, right? And a lot of the time, they're not hiring us because they actually want us. They're hiring us because they want a Black face. And, I call my law school out about that. I call everybody out when I see it. And I think I do push people to be better and get more Black people in a real authentic, real way, and we have to do it in a meaningful way. It's super necessary.
So how do people, I know we said we left off with, it's hard for Black people that are working in white spaces. And we have a lot of that, and that was a question that was posed. What are there any tactics or support systems that you think could be created, or do you think it's going to need to take place outside?
100%. No, I think that Black spaces need to be created within white institutions, and Black people shouldn't feel isolated or feel bad for that. I think that Black people need a certain level of access to leadership that their white counterparts might not. Right? I think it would behoove organizations for the CEOs to meet with these different affinity groups that are created and make sure that they're in a line and they understand the culture of their institutions and exactly what is going on, because a lot of the time things can be missed. And sometimes the people at the top have really good intentions, but the people who are executing their vision don't. And the cultures and the climates that are created are very detrimental.
Very toxic. They can become very, very toxic. And so, yeah, so I totally agree with you. So I actually have another question that came in, and it was actually from the NAACP branch here in Montgomery County, which is our neighboring county. So the question was, to what extent does the Minneapolis Police Department have policy and training on non-lethal use of force before going to lethal options? So canines, impact weapons, chemical irritants, de-escalation, and conducted energy. That was a question that.
They have policies on it, but it's really about the practices. And I think that's what we have to get down to the root of, is, are they actually applying what they're writing? And even before this, we were working on cultural curriculum and training where police officers, specifically the ones in Cadet Academy, will go through a community kind of initiation process and learning about the community and building with the community before they're placed in our community. And I think that is extremely important. And so I would say policy and procedure are important. Practices are the most important thing, because, yeah, while officers may remember what they read, they'll really remember what they see and how other officers are acting and what the chiefs are accepting.
Okay. How do we educate the youth? How do we keep the youth? It's interesting. So I'm sitting here having this conversation with you, and you're so wise. Just your wisdom is just amazing. And I've told you this when we have all of our conversations in Minneapolis and back here, but how do we really engage the youth? I had a conversation yesterday with one of my team members, and she was just talking about how the young generation, the millennials, are just very disillusioned with the whole process. And we're talking about being involved in voting, and how so many people were just really disengaged from her perspective, because she happens to be a millennial. And so how do we engage young people? How do we provide them with truth? And I know we talked about the education system, but what about, our young people that are at the age to vote? They've already been educated. How do we bring them into this space?
And for me, I think it starts at a young age. Not to say you leave behind the generations that are always older, but it's easier to start when you're younger. And so what I really encourage is we need more programs that are specifically tailored to teaching young Black kids about political science, teaching them about like the real social studies. Like our teachers are really a big part of the problem, right? When you had Black teachers, a lot of the issues that exist now didn't exist. But then you had Brown versus Board of Education, which issued in a theory of integration that really has never been a reality for Black people, right? Shipping a couple of Black students out to the suburbs is not integration. And so you lost a lot of that history and that context. I think you engage young people by going and meeting them where they're at versus asking them to come to where you're at. You engage them through music, you engage them through art and activism. You engage them by just engaging them and saying hello and not being afraid of them, right? It's very simple.
There's so much that you can share, and I cannot tell you how much I'm so appreciative. I know when we were going back and forth and I asked you to participate, you didn't.
I only did this for you, Tiffany. If it was anybody else, I would not have done it.
No, I know, and I'm almost moved to tears. I just don't want to, I'm just like, I've got to get myself together because I know that you're tired. I'm watching you. I'm seeing you. It's 5 o'clock in the morning and you're saying like, hey, we kept people from burning down the building. Now let's get the brooms. Let's clean up. So again, before we close out, I really want to give you an opportunity to share your last thoughts with people. Again, how they can contact you and how they can support you directly. And then also I would like for you to make some recommendations of places that they can support right here in the metropolitan area, like other organizations that you think would be a great place for people to go to.
Yes, so one, the NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization in the nation, right, which is phenomenal, and I'm thankful to have a platform with NAACP, but look for everyday people, right? I have a really good friend in DC named Tony Lewis Jr. We were on Instagram Live the other day, and he's doing dynamic work, and he's not even with the NAACP. So I say, look, I saw somebody write, did she plan on staying in Minnesota?
I was gonna ask you that too.
I plan on coming back home to DC and using everything that I learned here to bring it there, but I didn't want to come back empty-handed. I've been away from DC for a decade. If you could believe it, I don't even feel old enough to have been away from anywhere in a decade. But I have, and I plan on bringing information back. I plan on bringing resources back and a lot of experience and exposure back. I just want to urge you all, don't complain, activate. Oh, check out my website, leslieredmond.com. I actually launched my website before all of this stuff has hit. You all are saying thank you. You are welcome. I thank you all for being intentional and engaged and even wanting to listen and have courageous conversations, because that's the first step, right? Is having willingness and wanting to have the dialogue. And then the next step is activation. And so I salute you all for taking time out of your day when all of this is going on to just even engage in this conversation. And of course, Tiffany, for putting this all together.
Well, Leslie, I want to say thank you. I want to let you know you have an open invitation at any point in time that you want to have another conversation, because I believe that these, again, like I always say, a lot of times we put a period at the end of something. There's a comma conversation. There's a comma. There's something that comes after this, and we need to continue to keep that in mind. So any point in time that you want to have another conversation, you let me know, and we will absolutely open up this platform to continue this discussion and this dialogue. So I want to thank you,
sister.
And I want to say to you, I know that what you're doing is also, you know, you're risking your life on the front lines. And so this is not, I'm seeing you right now in a moment, but this is not what your day-to-day is. And I just want to tell you to stay safe, and my prayers are with you. And I love you. I love you, sis.
I love you, sis. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and keep doing everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I
love you, sis.
All right. Love you too. And that's it. That was Leslie Redmond from the NAACP Minneapolis chapter. If anybody has any questions, anything that we didn't get to, please make sure you put them in the chat or the question box, and we will get back to everybody. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with us, and I look forward to our next courageous conversation. Take care. Bye-bye.